I'm going to read it one more time just for the recording. Sorry. So sorry. I've missed this every time. So yeah, today we're talking about scope, and let me just go through global and local scope real quick since I wasn't recording. Any variable declared outside of a function is going to be in our global scope, the most outer scope. We call this global scope. You can access these variables anywhere in the program. So function inside of a function can access global scope, but anything that's inside the block of a function or in the local scope of a function block can only be seen by that function. So anything defined inside of a function is only accessible to that function, and any functions or blocks of code inside of it. So that takes us another step further beyond what we're going to talk about today. But you can define functions inside of functions, and that gets into a more intermediate topic. But we're not going to touch on that today because that's a different topic. That gets into something called closures, but we won't talk about that today. We're just going to stick with the basics of global and local scope. So global scope, this is kind of an example of what your code would look like when trying to, when talking about global scope. And let me get the pointer out real quick. So you can see if we kind of read this from top to bottom, how we think JavaScript would read through this program. Very short program. So var, this is the old style way of setting a variable or giving an identifier to a value, right? So setting a variable. We're setting the value Tom equal to this identifier called name or variable called name. So notice how it's not inside of any kind of block, right? We're not defining the variable in here. We are referencing it, but we're not defining it. We would say that this variable is at the most outer scope, or what we call global scope. So var name is at the global scope, which means any code that's below this point can access that value in that variable name. So if I console.log at this point in time, as JavaScript comes through and reads each one of these lines, it goes, all right, I'm going to store Tom in a variable. I'm going to console.log that value out. Then it also has a function defined called say hello. And if we call say hello will return the value of Tom, because a function has local scope, this thing called local scope. And if it can't find, when JavaScript can't find an identifier or a variable name, in this case called name, so when it can't find it, when it looks inside of itself in its own scope in this block of code, it's like looking at all of the contents of the body of this function, right? And it's saying, do I have a reference called name in here? And it goes, no. It's immediately like, I'm literally one line of code inside this function. I'm just returning name. So it says, I don't have name inside my local scope. I'm going to go ahead and take the initiative to look in my outer scope to see if maybe there's one defined above me somewhere, because you can access the global scope still. So this name here is it's able to look outside local scope of the function out to the global scope. So we can actually reference name up here. So these are actually both referencing the same thing. So this console.log would console.log the Tom value, and then say hello is going to return the Tom value. So in both cases, say hello is returning the same thing that this console.log returns. So this is global scope and like interacting with things that are global scope. I can access name from any code below where it's defined. Actually, there's a little bit more to that, but we'll get to that in a second. Just keep this in mind. I can access this from anywhere, and var is really there's a reason they went away from var and started using only let and const to define variables instead of var. So there's a reason they went away from this, and we'll talk about that, and I'll show you why. It has either conveniences or I mean, it is convenient that you can do all of the things, like you can reassign and redeclare with var, but you there's another thing happening that causes problems in larger programs. So local scope, as I said, is so like on the, if we look at this slide real quick, you see that I don't define name inside the scope of this function. Like within this block, I'm not saying let name equal anything. It's literally just referring to that name. So local scope, I am saying let age equal 25 within the scope of this function. So if I was to call this function, say my age, it would always return like that value. It's kind of like a hard-coded value. It's always going to return that 25 or whatever I set it to. Every single time I call it, that's what it will give me back. This syntax right here, me setting a variable inside of here, it's only accessible at the time that this function runs. Like it only exists during the call to this function. And then when it returns, it's gone until the next call again. So every time you call it, it exists for a temporary amount of time, only within this call to the function, and then it goes away. And it comes back every time you call it, which it, so if anything else, if I had any more, if I had another line of code in here that said, maybe like right below this, that said console.log age, I can't do that. I'm gonna show you, we're gonna write up an example using kind of what these slides are doing too, just so to reinforce all this. But if I had a line below this that said console.log age, and it was outside of the scope of the function, so somewhere down here, it won't do it. It'll say like reference error. Age doesn't exist because outside of the function, it does not exist. It only exists within the scope of the function. It does not exist in the outermost scope. So JavaScript can't see it because it's confined to this block, this function block. And it, like this is pretty much just understanding scope and how that's going to impact the way you write your code. So when we're talking about scope, we have to talk about a thing called hoisting. JavaScript does this for you. It's probably not clear what that term is implying, but hoisting, so this is kind of the catch I was talking about. So the way var is doing a couple things for you. It lets you do reassignment. So it lets you so you can declare your variable and give it a value, and you can redeclare the value the same way. But it's doing one more thing that it doesn't do for let and const. It does something called hoisting, and hoisting is when JavaScript is going to come through here. I kind of lied to you. I said it's going to read from top to bottom and execute from top to bottom, but there's a few special cases. Functions are one special case, so any named function and anything that starts with var. So var name gets this thing called hoisting, and any function names that you define also get hoisting. And what hoisting does is JavaScript looks at, pretend like this is our program, right? These 3 lines. And you'll see that JavaScript runs these lines. It looks like it runs it line by line. This is our output. So output undefined is for name. We didn't even get an error. We got undefined. And then the second console.log, we got the actual value of Tom. And this can throw you off because why is it undefined? Why was that not like some kind of error or exception message? Why did that even work? Because it will give you an error, like a red error in your logs, like in your console. If we would have not used var, if we would have used let or const, this would have been an error, but it's not an error for var. And var is like the special case, just like a function is a special case. So what happens here is hoisting. So you can think about JavaScript doing like pre-processing, maybe that's a better way to think about it. it kind of like previews your code real quick and says, hey, if I have anything that's a function name or anything that starts with var, I'm going to go ahead and even though that on this line where it says var name equals Tom, I'm technically declaring name as a variable and also initializing a value called Tom, the string. So I'm doing two things on this line, but JavaScript's going to come through here and do hoisting, which really means it's going to do this thing on the right. We wrote this side, but this is what JavaScript really did. This is how JavaScript read it. It said, all right, I'm going to hoist var name to the very top of the program so it exists. So the name reference exists. The declaration is there. I'm going to hoist it to the top so anything after it will run. Even though we said name right here, JavaScript took this line and said, hey, I'm going to take var name and I'm really going to put it at the top of the program, and then I'll run console.log name. And that's why you get undefined. And then this is saying var name equals Tom. This is redeclaring, and var lets you redeclare. Let and const do not let you do a repeated line like this. It does not let you redeclare. Let will let you reassign. We went over this in session 1 or 2, I think. I can't remember. It was 1 or 2, but we talked about reassign, redeclare and reassign, and I think it might have been 1. So we wrote this, and this is actually how JavaScript interpreted it, but this is really just for the var case and anything that's a function. JavaScript will do, this is what is hoisting, and it's good to know about this, that JavaScript interpreted these 3 lines as these 4 lines instead. So it basically grabbed your variable declaration, and when you write var name and you don't initialize, if you don't assign a value, it will be undefined by default. Like JavaScript will say, okay, you gave me nothing. I'm going to put in place of nothing undefined. So that's where the undefined comes from. So if you understand what's happening here, oh, hold on. I didn't pull my, is hoisting used for let too? No. So hoisting happens, var has been in the language for, I don't want to, it's been in the language for probably since the conception of JavaScript. It's probably been the first and only way initially to set variables in JavaScript. And I'm not a JavaScript master, so I might be lying here, but I know let started becoming more popular in like the ES6 syntax. The newer ways of writing JavaScript, let has become the more popular way because let and const actually consider the scope. It says it will actually assign a variable and keep it scoped. It will keep that in mind. var doesn't care about scope. It's like I will let you redeclare, reassign, and I will hoist everything in this scope. I will hoist all of the things. I'll let you do whatever you want. You can reassign, redeclare this variable as many times as you want. It really doesn't care. Let and const care. We can actually look at the MDM docs. I think they have, I don't know if it's MDM docs that had it. I seen a pretty good chart somewhere that breaks down the abilities. It might have been DigitalOcean's tutorial, but we'll look at that too. Just if you like a table of all of the, like a comparison table basically. But yeah, var and functions are basically this hoisting case. So JavaScript will automatically go through and hoist them to the top of your code, and we'll play with this idea some more. If it's really just not that clear still, it's fine. My keyboard just doesn't want to work. Oh, all right. So yeah, we're gonna jump into testing this right now. So scope isn't like, it's not a huge topic. It's not like anything that we've done previous. Object literals, data types you could talk on a lot longer, but today is going to be much shorter today. We're actually going to get to spend a lot more time playing in the code and then going over challenges, which maybe y'all will enjoy that more than me talking from slides the whole time. So let me pull up JavaScript scope. variable scope, because I want to show you this, like this one. They had a chart. I've seen it before. Here you go. So here's a difference. Here, let me make this bigger. So difference between var, let, and const. And we can see that using var, they have these things called function scope and block scope. You can see that var has hoisting. It uses hoisting. You can use reassignment, and you can use you can do a redeclare. And I can go over those if reassign and redeclare, if you're not separating those in the right way. But let doesn't have hoisting. You can use reassignment, but you can't do a redeclare. And then const is very restrictive, right? It's like once you assign this variable, you can't redeclare, you can't reassign. It's basically a constant. Once it's set, you can't change it. So these are like the differences, but this hoisting one is really the one we're trying to emphasize. Var and functions basically get hoisted above your code. So even though you wrote your code in a specific way, and technically I lied to you in the beginning and said that JavaScript's reading it from top to bottom and that's how it executes it. With hoisting, it's kind of like extra thing is happening there, right? So it's taking your var name, pulling it above all of the code that you've written so that it will exist prior to you assigning a value. And functions, they get hoisted to the top just by their name so that they will exist prior to any of your other code trying to call that function. Yep. So we can throw together the same examples and run it just so you can see the same kind of output. Let me pull up. What was that last example they had? So yeah, I want to use this one right here. I don't want to copy from there because that can create problems in raw text. You never want to copy from like a Word document or anything that has like special characters in it. You'll learn about that later. If you ever try to copy code from like a Word document or anything that has like pretty fonts, like fancy quotes, it'll break your code. It won't work. So be careful with those. They're special encoded characters. Languages don't appreciate them at all. All right, so I need to almost side. Let me pull this to the side real quick, and I'm basically going to copy what we have right there. So var name equals, we'll do Chris, and function say hello, and we'll modify this a little bit just to show you how to test assumptions. And I forgot this console.log name. And if you're ever curious, if you don't understand something, this is when I was new to coding. If I just couldn't find my like once I learned how to like jump in a console or just run my code, console.logs, anything that prints to a console, it'll really help you like run it and rerun it a dozen times and then modify something and just see how it behaves. Like this is kind of like your best hands-on experience you could get with like testing your own assumptions. So we'll run this real quick, and I'm expecting that this will show up in the console as Chris, and because of the way that REPL it runs, when I hit that run button up here, REPL it inside this console it always returns the last line. So I'm kind of expecting Chris to come out of here too. So a console.log Chris followed by another Chris, maybe. Hopefully that's a good assumption here. So yeah, so that's what happens. So the first one is my console.log. The second one is the last line of my code. And if I was to really execute my code, I should only get one, because when you tell your file to actually execute, you don't normally get output. Your return from a function never just sends itself out like that. But that's how a REPL works. It's read, evaluate, print loop. So it actually prints out the last line that you ran, the statement it evaluated. So if that's confusing, this is just this is part of how REPLs work. Anyways, so scope, again, this is global scope. And then we could say, what happens, like what happens if I var name in here and say Jeremiah, and then we'll return, we'll set Jeremiah, return Jeremiah. So let's run that one. So now I get, for my first line, I get Chris, but my return value down here, because it's the return of the function, is Jeremiah. So that, I mean, that itself is probably pretty obvious. This right here is probably pretty obvious. You're like, okay, I can follow that, right? So what happens if I move, what happens if I console.log name, let me prefix this with like some kind of ID so we can follow each of these print statements. What if I do it there and I do it here? And I actually need to console.log. I'm going to do this separately just so it actually, I'm going to make this one 2 and that one 3. So just so it's easy to follow when it outputs this, what is what. So thinking about what happens now with global scope, using var and these global scope things that can happen. So my assumption here is, all right, if I'm reading this like JavaScript tries to read it, so it comes down and it's initializing name to Chris. This function, all right, I said that this is local scope to this function block. So that means normally this means that you're scoping this to the function, the scope of this function. So I just want to see what happens if I were to say var name equals Jeremiah, and then, so I'm assuming this is Chris. My function runs, it gives me back my return value. So that's going to be Jeremiah. And oops, let's do that one. So I'm just grabbing the return value out of it and then printing it out. So what is name now? The real question is if name existed at the global scope and exists in the local scope, and then I set name, does this impact the global scope name too, or does this not care about global? Does it not affect it? Does it not change it? And this is really where like issues could come in depending on how you write your code. So I want to believe that it didn't modify it, right? Like I want to believe that my function didn't alter this global that I had, and it did its own thing. So let's run with that assumption. And that's what happened, right? Like the name here is still referencing the name at the top, the global scope. What happens if I don't redeclare? What if I don't redeclare? What if I do a reassignment? And if you think about this, like I'm not assigning, I mean, this name already exists in the outer scope. But let's see if this fails or if it runs it. Uh-oh. So I technically just, if you see what happened when this function, so 1 is Chris, right? We know that, like that's the easy one. But function runs right here when this function is called. the function, I didn't declare name in here. I didn't say var name. So I didn't do a declaration. I did a reassignment. And that means two different things. Declaring a variable in the scope of this function is one thing. Doing a reassignment means that JavaScript has to look that this thing exists first, and it does not exist prior to line 6. Well, it doesn't exist in the local scope prior to line 6. It does exist on line 2, which means that I altered this line right here, reassigned global scope. So if I wrote it without a declaration like that, that meant two different things to JavaScript, right? Like this was a reassignment of global scope. Every single time I run this function, it's going to actually change this most outer scoped value. And when you have a really large program, if you don't consider that, right, like you could, maybe you wanted something to stay at the global scope and you didn't want a function to impact it. You wanted it to stay some value. So this is likely where let and const, well, at least let came in and it said, hey, don't do that. But we'll look at those in a second. So if you're following what happened, I didn't get Chris back. I actually ended up, this function call reassigned my name to whatever that was. So, you know, that's why we basically reassigned that value. So what happens if we change this to let? And then I try to do a reassignment, and because let, well, actually, let's do this first. Let me do this first. So this is still defining a variable at this level. And yeah, let's see what happens with this. So I get Chris, Jeremiah, and Chris, which is what we initially got for var when I did the declaration. Let me do reassignment. Can I do reassignment out of the site? I can do reassignment too. So I can still, because of scoping, local scope to the function, it looks inside of itself still, just like var did. And it will let me look outside the scope at the global scope and say, hey, I'm still trying to reassign. I couldn't find it in my local scope, but I could find it in the global scope, and it still lets us do that. Let lets us protect that. So this is technically a different reference within the scope of hello, and that's why we can still get Chris out of there. Hopefully that makes sense, because this is reassignment, and this is declaring. I'm declaring this variable to exist in the scope of this function, and this one's being declared to exist in the outermost scope, the global scope. What happens if, let's see, what else can we do to show? What else can we do to show some weirdness about this? I can do const, but const is kind of obvious. I don't want to do closures. I don't think I want to do closures. Closures are fun though. All right, so yeah, this is, so far I've hit pretty much all of the scoping stuff, all of the things around scoping. Let me, obviously I can't do this. Oh, I can do that. Is that just like an ES6 thing? Maybe it picked it for me. I'm about to learn something new, I think. What happened? Now I'm curious. Okay. So it must default. I didn't know that. I thought I always had to do this. I guess I always done that. I've never tried to just do assignment right out of the box. I wonder if that assigns it to name. All right, so if I did const, I'll just show const just to show const. Let's do const and const. Let's see what happens with this case. Like const is at our global scope, but const exists inside the function. Does that work? doesn't fail, right? I'm technically redeclaring is what this looks like is that I'm redeclaring, but again, this is where scope comes in to protect things. So this variable name exists in the scope of the function. As far as JavaScript's concerned, in this outer context, I can't see that name, or it can't see that name. It can reference this name up here though. But if I try to if I say, okay, I'm not going to redeclare you, I'm going to try to reassign you, I expect an error for that one, because the moment it looked in the global scope and tried to do reassignment, we can't do reassignment on a constant. So constants, if you really want to protect your values, if you really don't want them to ever be reassigned, if you want to keep them as one value that can never change throughout the life of your program, you can use constant. There is one more thing I want to show. Let me get rid of these things. So just to prove what the example had, I'm going to get rid of all of these just to prove this point, right? Like scope is there. It's invisible, but it's there. I'm going to get rid of this var for a minute just because I can't do this without that. So name, right? Like I'm reading through this, I can see that there's a name being set and I can run it, but I still get a name error, and it's var, so hoisting still happens, or hoisting is still supposed to happen, but it's happening within the scope of the function, right? So it's hoisting it to the top of my function. Maybe let's test that. What if I console.log name before I ever declare it inside my function? So let me get this line 10 is an error. I can't do that. I just found that out. But let me get rid of it. That name is not defined. So is it not hoisting? Oh, wait. Yeah. So it's hoisting the function up, but not the var name, which is that's actually different, right? I was expecting something different. So let me do this. Console.log name, and let me comment this out. Oh, wait, it is showing up. What is? Oh, let me go back. I had a leftover error message still showing up. Trolling me. My console is trolling me. Guess I should call it, huh? All right. So we see Jeremiah technically because line 13. Well, we see undefined first, but then we see Jeremiah because Jeremiah is the return value, right? It gets assigned. It's happening in an order, but hoisting is happening. Hoisting is happening inside of the function itself. So name didn't exist in the function prior to line 8. Does console.log need to go after var name within the function? Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to show you right now is like why does this work? That's what I'm trying. That's what this is like what I'm trying to get across. Like why does that work? Because I'm declaring that thing after the fact, right? It's supposed to run from top to bottom, but var is this thing called hoisting, and that's really what we're trying to point out with this whole concept of hoisting is name. Let me go back to the slide because maybe oops, where'd my slide go? So hoisting, where do we have it? Right here. So remember how I said we can write our code this way, but But why does this work? Why does console.log name work when the second line, that's when it came into existence? Like this first line it should always fail. But var, JavaScript interpreted it this way. Like it did this thing called hoisting. So it actually pulled up var name above all of the code you've written and made it exist. It said, all right, I'm going to reach down into your code and pull it to the very top of your code, because that's what I do for var. But I don't do it for let, and I don't do it for const. I only do it for var, and I do it for function names. So it pulled it to the top and made it exist. But if you console.log it, like if you console.log it here, it took this and pulled it above, just like it shows over here. These are the same lines of code, by the way. This is, the left side is how you wrote it, and the right side is how JavaScript interpreted the left side. So keep that in mind. These aren't two different lines of, these aren't two different lines of code. I mean, they are, but left side is how you wrote it. Right side is meant to be how JavaScript interpreted the left side. But that's kind of what I'm trying to explain. So it hoists up your variable name. And when it does that, this first, how JavaScript receives it, it says, all right, I'm gonna just put this as undefined for the moment, because even though it was declared here, it pulled it up, let it initialize itself to undefined, and then your program will basically redeclare it again. This could have just been name equals, or like I could have did name equals Tom right here instead to be reassignment. But this also just shows that you can, with var, you can redeclare and you can do reassignment. It doesn't matter which one you do. But just know that it's doing this thing called hoisting, and that's what I'm trying to show right here. Like hoisting works inside the function too. When I run this, I really should run it. I really should run it like that, because the console is showing our return value, which is going to be line 10 because it's running in order. So undefined happens. I'm really just trying to pay attention to console.log. It's undefined. So if I console.log here, after I have declared it, now I should get undefined Jeremiah. And this last line is always our return value of the last line of our script file, basically. It's just giving us back that thing. I don't want that to be confusing. So it hoists it to the top of our function, which makes me wonder, like, okay, if I'm using var inside the function, can I console.log name here? Does it hoist it all the way out of the function? Can it do that? And now we finally run into the reference error that, you know, I wanted to hit this. I feel normal developers would feel like they should have hit this already, right? Like I should have hit that with this line right here. Like this is the error I should have gotten on line 9. Why does this work? It should have been this thing down here. Name doesn't exist yet. Why does it make it undefined? And this is behavior you need to know about, because you might run into a problem where you're like, I'm trying to work with this piece of data, but for some reason it thinks it's undefined right now. And maybe you're trying to do something too early, or something was hoisted too early, or it's just good to know about. So I went right into showing you the function level hoisting, but this one right here was meant to show you the same thing. So let me comment this function out, the call to that function. I'm just going to get rid of all that stuff. So we'll just worry about these 2 lines. This is global scope, right? We're not even inside a function block anymore, but still to show how hoisting is happening, we can console.log both of these again. Now, normally, like if I was in Python, this would fail immediately. Like it wouldn't let this happen. But JavaScript does hoisting with var. So let me clear that out. So I get undefined, and then I get Jeremiah. So I get this line first, which is undefined, and I get console.log, which is, then it's been set. So that's scope and hoisting. So this is hoisting. So if you need to relate that term to anything, if you ever come across it again, this is so you can know about it. So what happens if I do let right here, just to prove hoisting applies to var only, but not let and const? Let's see what we get now. Now I get an error, like cannot access name before initialization. Like this is what I would hope for. This is my expectation. Like this line failed now. That should have happened because name shouldn't have existed yet in my code. Hopefully that makes sense. And then so that's let. Let doesn't allow hoisting to happen with variable names like that. Const also, we can't access name before initialization. I could pretend, right? Like I could do exactly JavaScript's version interpretation of it. I could write my code this way and make it work the same way as var did for let. So I could say, all right, let name equal, or wait, let name. But then I can't say let name again because this goes against redeclare. Like let allows reassign but not redeclare. So let's do that one real quick. Let me clear that. Syntax identifier name has already been declared, and that's purely this keyword. If I take that keyword out, it's no longer declaring it. I'm saying, hey, name exists, go find it. I'm trying to reassign it. Line 6 is saying that. So this is now reassignment because I removed let out of there. So if I run that, now I get undefined, right? Because it does exist prior to line 5 now. So like name does exist and JavaScript says, hey, you didn't initialize the value. I'm going to make sure that it's got something. It's got to have something in there. So gives it undefined. And then this is reassignment of that variable so that the second console.log is the right value. If I do const, let's do both cases of const. If you ever run into, when I get these errors that I get right here, maybe the most important one to always pay attention to is the one that has this format right here. So when it says syntax error, that is a hint at what's wrong. And then this is like a description of what happened, which is sometimes cryptic. But if you pay attention, if you look at this every single time you get like some red error like this, like these are debugging errors. If you get good at noticing these, it'll make you a better developer. Like constantly seeing these over, like failing at your code a lot of times, you get really good at like noticing like syntax error, what it kind of implies, or reference error, what it implies. And it kind of gives you a hint at what to look for, like what you did wrong. Like maybe it's just one typo. You put a comma where you weren't supposed to put it, or but yeah, so it says missing initializer in const declaration. So what line did it have a problem with? 2. So we can't do that. That's what it's telling us. We can't initialize it without a value. Can we just say undefined? Oops. So we have to explicitly, for const, we can't just let it default to nothing itself. So that's good to know. I don't even think I mentioned that. So we have to give it a value, but let it does it for us, and so does var. Like if I was to say var, it would be undefined. Anyways, let me back up. I think I deleted some stuff. So this isn't reassignment now, right now. This is redeclaring, but const doesn't allow redeclaring. Const also doesn't allow reassignment. Oops, I should probably fix this. Let's just do that. All right, there, now we got a different error. assignment to constant variable. So this is the error I'm expecting because we can't do a reassignment with const, but if it was let, we're allowed to do it. Oops. Like doesn't like to clear my screen each time. Do it myself. Okay, so this is technically hoisting now. So hoisting happens. So the main takeaway is hoisting is the thing that happens with var and function names. Actually, we can look at a function name too. Oh, excuse me. Let's do. I'm going to uncomment this function right here just so we can review that. So just like a variable, I want to try to console.log whatever say hello is prior to me defining it. And I want to see if JavaScript says reference error that doesn't exist, or if it says, or if it gives me something. So it gave me something. It didn't fail. So just like var didn't fail when I referenced it prior to defining it or declaring it, right? So it's doing the same thing it's doing for var for functions. It's saying, hey, I'm going to grab this function name and I'm going to pull it to the top of the code so that it exists prior to anything else running. What's an initializer? Initializer, I feel like you mean initializing, or maybe, so when we're in the context of talking about a variable, yeah, so here, let me do it right here. When I'm saying declare name, right, I am declaring right here. I didn't initialize a value. And initializing a value just means I started it. I gave it an initial value to start with, like an empty string or a number, right? Like I started it with a value because I can always reassign that value after the fact, at least with var and let. So this is initializing a value, if that makes sense. So declaring a name, I don't want to say name, declaring a identifier, if that makes sense, or which we call variables. This is just a name identifier, or like it's a friendly name that you get to use to reference a value that exists somewhere. So, and if I went further than this, just trust me when I say it's much easier to remember name when you're talking about a value than it is to remember like 0x02f, like something like this, right? Like a memory address. Your computer, when you do these lines, sorry, this is like way beyond, this is like a lower level thinking about computers, but when JavaScript interprets this line, it's like, hey, I need to store this in memory somewhere. Like while my program runs, I need to reserve some spot in memory. And the computer needs an address, like a place in memory. Every little block of memory has like an allotment of space, and it has a unique identifier called an address. And it basically says, I need that spot, that address, because I need to put something there. And me trying to remember 0x02f, this whole address, it has no like what does that mean to me? Like as a developer, I'm not going to remember that. I'm going to have to keep like a logbook and say, all right, 0x02f, whatever, BA88, right? Like that is holding a name. I don't want to do that. That's way too much work. Maybe in like C or lower levels than C, the language C, like you have to like specifically reserve and allocate memory yourself. JavaScript, higher level languages like JavaScript or Python do it for you. So you don't have to like remember to do it. It does, like this one line is doing a bunch of work under the hood for you to do assignment. And so like I don't want to have to remember like a string is at that spot of memory because I've given 0x02FBAA, a friendly name called name, or this could be like age. This identifier age points at that spot in memory. That's way beyond what you need to know right now, but you can totally build apps and not ever have to know about this in our current state. Back in the day, you had to know you had to understand this because memory was much more constrained. Like computers today have so much memory to work with it, and higher level languages. You don't have to worry about this stuff. But that's kind of what happens is like you're reserving spots on your computer's memory, the RAM, however much RAM you have, 8 gigs, 6 gigs if your laptop has 4 gigs. Your phone has RAM. A lot of phones have like 2 to 4 gigs of RAM usually. This is all memory, and it's like allotment of space for programs to store things. And so it's really fast too. It's really fast at temporarily storing things so a program can run. And if you run out, your programs will get really slow. And this is how you end up like clearing memory or clearing caches or clearing memory or stopping programs to speed your computer back up again, or just restarting a computer. Usually that's what people do. Okay, it wasn't an error message, so good to know. We don't need to be concerned about it. Yeah, you don't need to be concerned about like memory, like where at in memory something is, because you have a label that it's kind of like a mapping, right? Like if you wanted to think about it another way, you remember object literals, right? They're kind of like, they call it mappings or hash maps, or it's basically like a key that's mapped to a value. And if you think about it, like our key is our variable name, like our var name, and it points to an address in memory. And under the hood, that's kind of what the language does for you. It like figures out where the thing is stored by its label that you gave, a friendly label, because saying name is so much easier than trying to remember a memory address, especially when they're dynamically allocated memory addresses. It would be extremely difficult to do that. There are ways to. I don't want to go too much deeper into that, but yeah, you don't have to worry about it. you can totally build apps, mobile apps, web apps, in these higher level languages like Python or JavaScript, C#. All of these higher level languages, they worry about memory management. You don't have to. And I am thankful for that, because I don't want to worry about that. All right, so this is pretty much scope. I think I'm actually like perfect on time. I thought I was going to talk for way less than this. So did everyone prefer how we did it yesterday? Like, would you rather go on a break for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, work on a challenge, and then come back? Or would you rather just immediately hop into a challenge right now and go over it? And then
challenge.
You want to hop into a challenge first? Is everybody, are there more votes for that?
A challenge is fine.
Yep. Okay. All right. Yeah, we can, if anyone has a preferred chat, well, let's see if we have any. I don't think we have any scope ones, do we? Yeah, there's not really. Scope isn't like a huge thing like types or control flow.
Can you do, I don't know, this is a function, it's a gravity challenge. I had some issues with that one. It's about figuring out the rocket launch or something about the fuel and all that stuff. Something about
maybe a little bit. Yeah, maybe a little bit, has a little bit of math in it or something.
Number 13.
sounds like it might
13. Have. What, do I was trying to figure out, do you need a formula for that? Because I was searching for a formula. I came up with a formula and it worked for one of them, but it didn't work for the other. And then I saw some other formulas when I searched, like a lot of scientific formulas that I didn't understand. So I was just wondering, how do you solve that?
Yeah, so I haven't looked at it yet. So somebody else actually, one of the other instructors actually mapped up all of these all these 49 challenges. I've done similar ones, but yeah, I've done similar ones, but it's something that has loops. That's where I'm really struggling. Accessing the first 2 key value pairs in an object of an array is crushing me too. Yeah, we can go over. I mean, we have plenty of time right now. We have 2 hours. So we can work on a challenge, take a break, and come back and work on another challenge. We can take like a short break and do that if everybody is okay with that. So yeah, I don't have to talk too much on scope today. Like we pretty much covered scope. And if you understand scope, we can just go back to all of the more difficult things like looping and structures. So let me read this challenge real quick because okay, yeah, they're giving you the formula, right? Like the formula is this, even though it might not be obvious. They're saying like weight is equal to, is this acceleration due to gravity? Yeah, I think this is, it's abbreviated. I think this is acceleration due to gravity. So the acceleration times the mass. So mass times acceleration is equal to the weight. You are an astronaut standing on a newly discovered planet X, and you need to calculate how much your ship weighs in order to determine the fuel needed to blast off. Write a function that takes in the acceleration due to gravity on planet X and the weight of your ship on Earth as integers and floats, and outputs the weight of your ship on planet X as integer or floats. Write a method that takes in the, kind of just read over this and just didn't interpret this. Write a method that takes in the acceleration. Yeah, so acceleration due to gravity on planet X, acceleration of planet X, and the weight of your ship, which I think is mass, right? So the mass of your ship. So you take gravity and times it by the mass of your ship. And that looks like what these numbers are. So it takes these two numbers and multiplies them together to get the weight. Why is it 10?
But that second one doesn't work. If you multiply that second one 10 times 10,780,
Yeah.
it doesn't equal.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll look at that. I don't, because acceleration due to gravity on Earth, this should be a constant, right? This doesn't change. So I don't know what they were doing right here. So okay, yeah, we'll look at it. Maybe the input values are wrong, or someone was testing something. Write a method that takes acceleration. Okay, so we're basically we'll try. I'm gonna copy all this over, and so here we can do the multi-line comment. And we want to run this one down here. And I know that the console is going to spit out whatever value I return out of here. So if I say just return 0 for the moment and run it, I get a 0. So line 16 is returning my 0 for the moment. I'm just going to leave it there. And then we'll change it once we figure something out. So standing on a newly discovered planet X, and you need to calculate how much your ship weighs. We need to calculate how much our ship weighs. This is the weight on Earth, and this is the, so I'm going to take these two values. I'm just breaking this down step by step just so we know what, we have an example to like keep in mind while we're trying to map out this logic. So 9.8, the first argument that we're sending in is going to be this variable name, ACC on X, which is really supposed to stand for, it takes in this, so it's this thing, acceleration on planet X. So I'm gonna actually just put that in there, right? I'm gonna put that there. And say, I just want to keep in mind what that thing is while I'm working through this. And then weight on Earth is this is our ship's weight on Earth. And we're trying to figure out how much our ship would weigh if it was on another planet, it seems. This really isn't, I don't know if this should be called on X. This should technically be acceleration due to gravity on any, whatever planet it is, right? So, because 9.8 is for Earth, and 10 must be for this other planet that we're trying to calculate for. So, all right, we're going to calculate what Earth would give us, I guess. I think I'm reading this right. And outputs the weight of your ship on planet X. This might be written a little weird. So, okay, weight on Earth, ship, mass. I think that's what that is. Ship weighs in order to determine the fuel needed to blast off. Okay, so our formula was written right here to determine weight. We could really maybe even rewrite this. Acceleration due to gravity. So we know that that is ACC on X, and mass is, I feel like I'm going to do this wrong. I think I'm making an assumption here, right? So, because otherwise this is just multiplication. Whoops, not weight. What was I typing? Yeah, weight on Earth. Does that look wrong to anybody? Again, I haven't done this challenge yet, and I feel like it can't be this straightforward, right? It can't just be multiplication. I think I might be. Let's try it. Let's see what we get. We have an input and an output to look against, right? Like this is expectations right here, or our alleged expectations. So on X, whoops, on X times weight on Earth. Let's find out. We get 196548, which that's not that. So okay, so it's not just that. I am not considering something. So Earth is technically a constant, right? So I have to, they messed the math up. You have to divide a count by 9. Yeah, I figured as much. We actually have to determine the weight of the mass of the ship using Earth as our foundation. So this is kind of written a little weird. It could be written better. Maybe I'll go rewrite it. So Earth gravity. I mean, they kind of hint at it right here, right? Acceleration due to gravity on Earth is 9.8. So acceleration, we'll say Earth, ACC for Earth. And I'm going to say this is a constant and doesn't change, right? So that's Earth. We need to get the, yeah, divide. Sorry, I'm reading that chat message. Divide the other planet. To get the weight, we need to take the acceleration due to gravity, which for Earth, this is 9.8, and times that by the mass, the ship's mass. Actually, this is giving us the weight. This is giving us an already calculated weight that the ship weighs this on Earth. So we actually have to divide weight on Earth by 9.8 so that we can get, I think I'm thinking of that the right way. So this is our weight. Like it's giving us 20,056 as our ship's weight on Earth. And if we know that the gravity on Earth, if we know that this is the formula, right? Like what they put what they put right here is how they got the weight. We know that if we do the formula backwards, so they did multiplication, if we do division, we can undo what they've already done to get each one of these, to basically isolate one of these sides. So I can take the weight that they gave us and I could say, if I know this part of it, if I know that this is 9.8 for Earth, if I divide my mass by 9.8, I can get the original mass back out. But do I want the original mass? I need to reread this again, sorry. I wasn't ready to math today. You are an astronaut standing on a newly discovered planet. Calculate how much your ship weighs. I need to know how much our ship weighs so that I can determine the new weight. So yeah, I do need the mass. I need my original mass of my ship, so I can times it by the planet X's gravity. So 9.8 is for Earth, and 10 is supposed to be planet X's gravity or acceleration due to gravity. Okay, I think I'm understanding it. I don't know if everybody else is following everything I just said. I kind of just worked that out in my head out loud. Yeah, so I have to find mass, basically. Exactly. I have to find mass, and that's not too hard. We just have to undo their formula. So they're giving us this number right here is, I'm going to give you what your ship weighs on Earth, right? So we say weight on Earth, and if I divide that by Earth's constant acceleration gravity rate, right, like 9.8 or ACC Earth, I should get back, if I take the weight and divide it by the acceleration, I should get my mass back. We can make that a const too. Someone tell me if I'm not doing this right. I'm pretty sure I'm doing this right. I'm not that, I have had math, but you know. So if I have my original, I guess this does require a little bit of math, but it's nothing, it's not algebra or geometry or anything. So it's not too bad. It's just multiplication, division here so far. Original mass of my ship on Earth. So I need to know my original mass, and then I just need to take this acceleration and then basically redo the formula, I guess. Is that what I'm doing? Then use mass times the gravity on planet X. Yeah. So, but if I'm passing in 9.8, oh yeah, it's giving me the same value. That makes sense, right? I'm getting the exact same value that went in because I'm dividing by 9.8. But for the first one, we're passing in Earth's constant, right? We're basically passing this in. I'm basically dividing it out, but then remultiplying it by exactly the same thing just for Earth's case to test. So this one here is for Earth. This one here is for planet X. Maybe that helps it make more sense right there, because this is Earth's acceleration constant number that they're using for gravity. This is planet X's version. So technically, if I passed in the weight of my ship on Earth, dividing it and then remultiplying it by the same number should give me back the same number. But I need this 9.8 so that I can determine planet X's, right? So we basically have to do the same. To get the weight, we just do this same exact formula again. Even though I just undid it here, I'm going to redo it again. So let me write it out like they have it, which isn't technically valid, but it will be in a minute. So I need to do acceleration due to gravity, which was what was passed in. Whatever was passed in for the acceleration, so this is what was passed in. This is just a constant. And for our first case, this right here, for this case right here, the acceleration on X acceleration on whatever planet, what we're talking about, is actually 9.8. So it actually happens to be exactly the same as what Earth is, because we're actually passing into Earth. But anyways, so we're just going to do the multiplication, right? So we're doing acceleration times the mass, which is basically what they had right here. We just have to make the syntax right. So I just want to take acceleration of gravity times the mass. For the first case, it doesn't make that much sense because we're passing in Earth and we're basically getting back the same value. So if I pass that in, I get 20,056, which is what we passed in, which is what is expected. But now I should be able to test a different planet in comparison to Earth. So if we passed in this planet X, we get the, oh, I didn't pass in the right number. I have to pass in. So this is the weight. I can't leave it as the same weight because this was for a different calculation. So I need to pass in both of the parameters, right? So this is the weight of the ship, and then so the formula can work right. So I just passed it in wrong. So it says it's 11,000 for that one. So yeah, this was just like working out the formula, I guess, and do it. It's a little bit of a math formula. There are some challenges out there that definitely have you do math calculations, but we could actually like look up. Does anybody know any off the top of their head, like the acceleration due to gravity of another planet? We could like test one ourselves. If this is actually like, this seems like a simplified version, but.
Thanks for showing that. Do you mind putting that in Slack?
Yeah, I can put it in Slack. Acceleration due to gravity, Jupiter. 24 meters per second. I don't know if we have, I don't know if this is actually the right formula or not, but whatever. Oh, I guess I would need to know the weight. I would need to know the weight to get the fuel. I guess that doesn't help, even if I did do it like that. We need the other parameter. We need to know what the weight on Earth of the thing is. But I guess if the ship weighed 10,000 whatever units of measurement that's supposed to be, and we passed in the acceleration for Jupiter, like, I guess that's our number of how much, what were we determining, how much fuel it would take. And outputs the weight of your ship on planet X. Oh, it outputs this is the weight on Earth, and that's what it would weigh on the planet. So a lot more, I guess. All right. So somebody else wanted to see yeah, I'll put that in, let me put that in Slack for you with the value that we're trying to get. Okay, and then somebody else wanted to see a one with loops and object literals and accessing keys while inside of a loop. One second. Let me throw this into a snippet before I forget. Is there any preferred challenge in mind? Whichever person wanted to see. Patrick? What was this called again? Gravity? Gravity.
Yeah, it's gravity types number 13.
And yep. All right. It is in Bootcamp Prep channel. All right, so we can do, let me, these say arrays and loops. You said object literals and loop, or objects and loops. Not recursion. We are not ready to do recursion yet. So employee data object arrays and loops, or objects and loop number of characters. Let's look at this one first, I guess. Oh, we did this one. Yeah, we did this one already, I believe. Yep. Did we? We did this one. I think I shared this code actually. High score. Did I not share the code that we went over for that? We did remove zeros and we did high score. I must not have shared it. I don't see it. Patrick, did you have any like particular one of mine? Was it this one or was it, this one seems like it might actually be more difficult because it uses a combination of objects and arrays. I'll go over whichever one you want to go over. We can, oh yeah. Yep. This is, it's starting to look like more structured data, like data that you might actually receive in some kind of request. So it's an array of object literals. This isn't me. I'm definitely not a designer. We can go over this one if you want. Does anybody not want to go over this one?
Yes, do it.
Okay, sweet. All right, we can take a look at this. Oh man, it's gonna be a we have time for this, so it's fine. All right, you're a new programmer at your company. Your CFO needs some data regarding all the companies. Your CFO needs to know the number of employees per job title. So we need to count. We need to count. We basically need like an object literal that stores each job title, maybe as a key. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm gonna write this in comments too, but I'm just thinking out loud while I'm reading this, while I'm reading it aloud. So number of employees per job title, that tells me like I'm gonna need some kind of like name of the job or category of the job, like backend developer, and then how many how many employee counts there are for that, like what number of employees are bound to that title of the job, which the data type going through my mind is like an object literal, key being the job title and then the value being the count. That actually number of characters challenge, actually you do like a simplified version of that. So we can use some similar logic, I guess. We'll see. The average salary for that job title within the company. So not only do we need the job title, but we're gonna have to do a calculation for average, which we can look up the formula for that, just to break this down by the numbers. If anybody doesn't know how to do averages off the top of their head, we'll go over averages just to revisit some math concepts. So there's a little bit of math in this one. We have to find average using currency, basically currency numbers. The average bonus that job title receives within the company. So we have to do a second average and the average total compensation for that job. So we have to do 3 averages. So I think I already know that I probably want to create a function for myself that can calculate averages based on what I give it, like a reusable function that just, I give it a set of values, it gives me back a calculated average. And it's not really biased on bonuses, or it doesn't care. I just have to give it a data type, like some kind of collection that it can determine an average. I'm basically going to feed it some data. It's going to give me back a piece of data that I want. And like seeing these 3 things stacked together, the average, the average, the average, that's 3 things that are repeating for me. I don't want to write the calculations to determine average 3 individual times. That tells me immediately I might be able to put that inside of a function So in my head already, I'm thinking like, I know I'm probably going to write a function for that, but I'm not going to start off writing that function just yet. I'm going to make sure I get my head wrapped around what the problem is. So this is where it's telling us right here what it's going to give us, or like what we can, our expectations, like what you can expect to start with, what our data is, data types, what those values might be. And it gives us an example of what it looks like. And this is so you can get a feel of like what you might have to do. If you pay attention right here, like this square bracket, and then there's this whole opening and closing of an item with the comma. This is an array with, and then these are key value pairs. So this is one item. If I was to index this array and pass it a 0 index, it would give me back this entire object, because this is technically, this comma right here says that our first item in the array is like a whole set of data. It's an object literal type. Like, so index 0 is this one, index 1. I can loop over each one of these. I can use a regular for loop and iterate over this entire mapping one at a time, like one of these blocks at a time, if that makes sense. So I know that I'm going to have to loop over this data, because I need to like kind of peer into every single one of these object literals and say, hey, I need to collect every salary out of here so I can try to perform an average calculation. I need to add all of these up and then divide by however many there are so I can get my average salary. And I actually have to do this for bonus, for salary, and what was the other one? The average salary, the average bonus, and the average total compensation for that. So total compensation, I guess, would be adding these two together for each one of these, adding them together to create a total compensation per person, and then doing an average across that. So we have to do a few math steps here for this one. If I lose anybody while we're doing this, definitely stop me or say something in the chat or something, like if I go too fast on the part, because this is like a multi-stage, this is going to be like a multi-stage thing to solve this, but maybe we'll try to do one at a time. So maybe we'll start with like this first one. We're going to break this into layers, right? Like first, let's try to get this far. Like if you break these problems into pieces, you'll make it easier on yourself rather than trying to solve this entire thing at one time. But let me finish reading the rest of this. You're given an array of objects, or object literals, that represents all of the employees in the company. What just disappeared on me? Or something moved. Uh-oh, that's not good. Is everyone still in here? Are we all?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm here.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
I lost my border for recording, and I don't know if it's, let me, I'm going to click OK on this. Hopefully it doesn't kick me out. I think we're okay, but yeah. Apparently I'm signed out. Hopefully I can keep going. If this, okay, let me just say this. If this chat closes, if the meeting stops for some reason, ping, DM me in Slack or in the Bootcamp prep channel and just say something, and I'll try to keep my eye on it. I don't think this has happened before. This is kind of a shared account, so hopefully it doesn't kick me out. All right, continuing on. Where was I? You're given an array of objects or object literals that represents all the employees in that company. You need to parse through all the employee data and return the array of objects. Let me make sure I am still recording good. And you need to parse through all the employee data and return an array of objects that represents each job title and corresponding compensation data, including title, total employees. So we're basically returning a new object literal that is it basically, it doesn't really want the specific names. It doesn't care about that, but it wants me to kind of like aggregate all of this data into some new, like into entire, I'm basically generating a new piece of data, like a data set out of this. And that data set is going to be another object just like this, but we're going to give it these key, like these are going to be the keys of that object. It's going to be title, total employees, average salary. So, okay. Now that I've kind of like got a feel for this, let me, I'm not going to copy the whole data set out of here, but I am going to copy this part of it because that's a lot to, maybe I'll copy the first bit of this just so I can remember what's in there. Oh, we already start with it. That's good. All right. So let me multi-line comment this like that. And I need to write some comments for this because I want to break down, what do we want to break down here first? The number of, let me grab these. I still have to scroll up anyways. So I kind of want to do this in stages, I think, just for y'all's sake, because I want to do this one first. So we're going to do that one. And these other two I'm going to leave out of these are the three I'm going to leave out. These out of the way. So we're going to concentrate right now on just solving this one part of it and testing our expectations for that first. And then we'll try to, I think if we can get the average salary one time like this one, we can, if we write it in a good enough way, we could reapply a lot of the logic for this first one because it's just determining averages. We can probably write it in a way to reuse it these other two times. And this will actually be good for like learning how to write your own function in a reusable way. So it's not bound to any specific thing. So again, our employee data is an array of objects. So I'm going to go in with this in mind, this very first case, just so I can ignore the rest of these for the moment. I'm going to use, who is this? Joe, the developer, as my first thing to think about here. Oh man, just go to the next line. I'm trying to conserve a little bit of line so everything will fit on the screen. All right. Square bracket. There's more. Okay. All right. So thinking about step one, so that I don't have to think about these also at the same time, let's worry about the number of employees per job title. And so we know that we have an array, and we know each item in the array is basically an object, and each of these objects has 4 keys with values mapped to them. And one of those keys is title, which it kind of hints at, right? Job title. So I'm assuming that's the right title. It looks like it's a job title. The first thing I'm noticing is it's all lowercase for some reason. Maybe that's like, you know, if I skim through here, all of them are all lowercase. It's good thing to note, I guess. Like, okay, that's, you know, normally I would probably title case like a title, but they did it all lowercase for a reason, maybe to save you an edge case headache. I mean, it's not that big of a headache, but all right. So the first thing we need to do is, I know that array of employees is an array of objects, really. Each object represents one employee. There are a lot of objects representing multiple employees. Therefore, it's an array of employees. So if I do this, right, I'm indexing with 0. This is the first item in our array. So it's technically Joe right now. And I think I want to write it out this way at first. This is Joe, our first item. I'm not using a loop yet. I'm directly accessing index 0 just so we can understand how to interact with the object. So I'm going to assign my first item to an identifier called employee. And I kind of just want to try to solve this first case without a loop, just so I can make sure my logic's right. This is just me doing extra steps to hopefully make this make sense. So employee, when I translate this into employee, I'm no longer working with an array. I've accessed it by the index. So I'm now talking to an object. And if you remember, talking to an object, I can use the dot notation. So I could say dot title to access developer here, or I could use the brackets and say title to access. This would give me back developer. If I do this, it'll give me the value that's tied to that key of title. So it oh man, I'm gonna lose my voice by the end of this. So the thing it wants us to do is get the number of employees per job title. So this is not that useful because we're only talking about one person, so one job title. But technically, let's pretend my array had only a single person. What would my expectation be that I should get back? And I kind of want to map out what my return value looks like, because it's gonna help me to build it up. So it said in here somewhere, did I not? Oh, I did copy it. Let me go to the README because it was more clear. It's more clear. It highlights. So I need an object to return back. Actually, you need to parse through all of the employee data, and I need to return an array of objects. I need to return an array of objects that represents each job title. That makes sense because an array of objects means there's, it's not just going to be a title of developer. It's going to be multiple items where I'm basically combining everything that's a developer title. I need to combine them into one, but then everything that's like a product manager needs to be combined in their own. So it's going to be two separate items in our array where we're getting rid of the names and we're basically aggregating data. So my return value in my head, or well, at least what they said, it needs to be an array, right? Like I'm trying to visualize what they want. And they're saying an array of objects. You need to parse through the employee data and return an array of objects. So this is an array of objects, except they want us to change the keys to those things right there. Title, total employees. Let's do those two first keys right there, and we'll ignore averages because we're currently ignoring the averages right now. So let's do title and number of employees. So it wants an array of title. It wants to get back this thing where it's a title, and then it should be the job title here, right? It's like some value like developer. So I'm just kind of like mocking up what the expectation is, so it's kind of obvious. So we want to return an array where it has title, developer, and then was it total employees? I think total employees. And they spelt it. They've highlighted it a specific way for a specific reason. So like these are code highlighted because we need to they're trying to be specific, emphasize the text. We want the spelling and everything to match this. So it needs to be camel case. So starts off all lowercase, and then the second word starts with an uppercase, and that's camel casing. So we're gonna do the same thing for the keys. Total, was it employees? Man, I can't remember 2 seconds. All right, total employees, maybe it's 0 for the moment, right? So my data structure needs to look like this, but that's only for developers. It's really wanting it to look, it wants us to like aggregate this data. So I'm just trying to make this more, let's ignore return for a moment. This is kind of the structure they're talking about, and me mapping it out. I'm like, okay, so I basically need to build up. I need to build up this object, like aggregate this data into an object I create within my loop. And I need to like put this inside of an array. I need to like add it. So I start with an empty array. I create an object inside my loop and then add it into that array. And then I can, if I do it that way, kind of like we did the string concatenation challenge where we kind of looped and concatenated a string onto itself. We can return the eventual array once it's all built up. So technically, without a loop, this would be that, and total employees would really be, actually I would have to, I can't do a dot length or anything. So I'm just kind of mapping out what for this one specific case, I'm not looping yet, but I'm just looking how I might create one object, because I'm going to turn this into a loop now, I think. So it starts to make more sense. Replacing these lines with looping code. All right. So do y'all want to do the regular style loops like this way? Or we could use the array style. Since we're going to be looping over an array of objects, because it's an array, I could say let employee, is it of? I think it's of. Oh man. See?
Array style.
This one? Though we could also do while.
The second one.
Array style. Okay, yeah. So let me scroll back in case anybody missed this or haven't had time to review it yet. So arrays. Why didn't I cover it there? Maybe it was in the intro, wasn't it? We were talking about iteration. So for and of keywords are used for arrays, and for and in are used for objects. So we're going to use this one right here, for and of. So for let item of array. So this is the format of how you start it. I'm going to do that same thing. So my array, the left side of the of has to be the iterable or the array, which is this incoming data, which is basically this incoming data, right? This array. So for of array of employees, this is our array. Employee right here is a temporary variable that's going to be accessible inside this loop. Basically, maybe I'll name this employee object, because as this array is going to iterate for us, as we iterate over this array, the for loop knows that it's going to store one by one. It's going to store one of these inside of the temporary variable. I'm going to call it a temporary variable because temporarily it's going to hold on to each value of the array starting from index 0, and it's going to move forward. Each time we loop, it's going to go from the 0 indexed item, which is the first object, which is Joe. It's going to start with Joe. So employee object will be this entire object, if that makes sense. If you're tracking with that. So now employee object is basically kind of like this line 75 and 76. So I can do, I'm going to get rid of those lines in a second, but I can access title, the dot syntax, or I can use the bracket syntax to access the value out of the temporarily stored object. So the very first object is going to be like Joe's title is going to be in that one on the first iteration. Second iteration is going to be the next person. So the second iteration employee object is going to hold Kelly, and the loop's going to go really fast through all of these array items. So what do I want to do in here? I need to basically, I'm going to get rid of these lines because I don't need them now. because my for loop is doing that for me. Why is that red? Why is that a red line? Semicolon. Okay. Maybe it's just a linter error. I don't know. All right. Well, if it fails, it will fail and let me know. So employee, so this will get me every, let's do this. Let me console.log step by step. Make sure my assumption's right here. Make sure that this thing will loop and print out every single job inside of the array of data that it gets. And I can comment this out because this was just a, like, me mocking up our return value, our eventual return value. Okay, so first thing I need to do is I need to call my own function. To test this, I need to call my own function, first of all. So this is my function. I need to pass it my array of employees. It's all been defined for us up here, right? So I need to pass this employee data, because this is our like simulated data, into my own function. Because all I want to do right now is see that I can print out all of my titles. And we can see that we have 7, looks like 7 job titles printing out. And if we were to go in here and count each one of these objects, there should be 7. So that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5, that's 6, and that's 7. So we're printing 7 job titles out. So we know the loop is looping through every single object and printing out every single title, at least for that line. We want to actually collect these all into a brand new array that we can set. So we can, what did they give this thing a name? That's what I want to know. You need to parse through all the employee data, return an array of objects that represents each job title and the corresponding compensation data. Yeah, so I'm just going to make up a name for this new array that we're eventually going to return, and it's going to be called, I'm going to say AGG data. It's an empty array. This is going to stand for our aggregated data, right? It's going to be our eventual, the thing that we eventually return. So my loop is constantly going to be pushing in, it's going to be adding or appending, however you want to think about the terminology here, or basically inserting new objects inside of here. I'm going to try to push in one at a time. I'm going to build up my data and push it in to this array. And then once this loop is done, it's going to return that data. I can't do this because that wouldn't be good. But inside here, I need to add, well, one, I need to build up my object aggregated data. Well, let's see, how is that going to work? We need to, this is going to be multiple steps. I need to build up an object that has the aggregated data in it, and then I need to, there's probably another step in here. I need to add this new object to my AGD data array. And then let me get this out of here because I'll get it down below. And then down here, I need to return our final data, right? Like our final result. This isn't all of the steps, I don't think yet, because I'm kind of thinking out loud at the moment. So we basically want to build a new object in here, right? Like that thing I was mocking up down here. At the moment, I just want to concentrate on number 1. So well, I have 2 number 1s now. We'll call this 0. I kind of want to build up this object right here right? So as well as we loop, I need to create a, this is going to be a problem, right? Because I kind of need to keep counts of employees for a very specific title, but we're going to be looping over every single title in here. So I can't just do this to create my object. I kind of need to keep track of what I've seen before and what count it is, kind of like the number character challenge, where we had to like track how the character count. We were returning back an object that had a character key and then a count of that character for a given string. We kind of need to do something similar to that. So we can do we can't rebuild this object inside the loop, which makes me think I need to do it out here, which is kind of interesting. Okay. I think I just overthought this. So let's try sorry, let me talk out loud and not try to internalize this. My problem is right now, at the moment, I'm looping over every single one of these. And we don't know what the order of these are going to be. Like it could be two developers followed by a product manager. It's not going to be developers first. They're all going to change. It's going to change with every person. Our code has to like adapt to that. It's not going to be in any specified order. So if I do what I'm doing right here, and here, let's just work through it, I guess. So we could call this yeah, this isn't going to work, but I almost want to loop over. I really need to check. Let me back up. We really can't do this in here. I can't make a determination of the total employees at the time of creating this object. I kind of have to do the same thing with the array, where I'm like constantly building up an object that I eventually append to my array. So title, we can make a title like this. Yeah, I need to iterate through each one of these and build up an object. So employee object title will be developer, and I need to like remember this in some kind of piece of data. So let me say, I'm gonna have to fix this later, I think. I'm gonna call this like, it's a terrible name, but I'm going to start it like this. I need to know that I've seen developers before, and so I can count. I need to count these employees who are developers. And to do that, I need to loop over every single employee and say, if this value, sorry, let me get rid of that. If this value that's being stored in here, which is the first one is going to be Joe, the developer. So if developer is in my scene object, right? Like if it exists in here, this is kind of like the same logic we did with the number of characters. If that's in there, I basically need to increment my total employee count. So I need to like add 1 so I can count my number of developers. But there's also that case where it has never been seen yet, right? So just like the number of characters challenge, we're taking kind of a piece of that and using it in here. So if I have seen it, if I have seen Joe, the developer, then I want to say employee, whoop, not a data, employee, what was it called? I thought I copied this down below. So total employees is what the key name is gonna be. So total employees is equal. So I can do this line, which is the equivalent of doing this line. Whoops. So it's kind of like a shorthand. I'll do the non-shorthand version. So I'm saying just like in number of characters, we said grab the value that was in there before, which is what we're going to do in the else side, but grab that value that it started with, which will start off as 0, take 0, add 1, and now there's 1 employee. We have just now seen this employee where, or we have seen the employee before, and we're going to add 1 to it. And then this else side is we are just now seeing Joe, the developer. And I'm using Joe as the very first case as an example, just while I'm thinking this out. Let me get rid of that line though. So take the value that was currently in there, add 1 to it, and then set it to this new calculated value. And then this one has to do not that, it has to start it with 1. So if we just seen this employee before, then add them. But this isn't all we have to do. We also have to remember who this goes to. We're representing 1. So as we're iterating, we're saying oops, I'm using, I'm not doing the right thing here, sorry. This is supposed to be seen. And again, I need to pick a better name for that. So I'm only representing 1 thing here, which means I have to do, this isn't going to come out how I want it to come out ideally, but it will show you how to work through this piece of logic first before appending it to an array. So we loop through all of these job titles. Technically, we're saying if the job title exists in my scene object, then I'm going to say 1. I've seen this job title before, so I'm going to increment my count. If it hasn't been in there, I'm just going to set it to 1 because this is the first person I've seen with that job title. And the object that's going to come out of this at the end should, it's not going to be ideal, right? The thing I want this to be, I kind of want this to happen where there's like 3 developers. There's actually, I think the way that I had it before, right? It was like this. I want an array where it's developer. I'm recreating the type. I'm creating my own type. I'm going against the rules. So they want title. They want a title and it to be developer. So we can do that. So if scene title is equal, so if scene title is equal, array of employees. I'm looping over each employee, grabbing their title, and I want to compare it to, oh man, do I have to do nested loops for this? I don't really want to do nested loops yet, but we can. Whoever picked this one, that's probably me, but this is a good challenge. Uh, this this is a good challenge. This is a good challenge to have. It's not it's not impossible, but I'm trying to use what we've learned so far to solve it, and I'm getting stuck doing it. So I don't want to do nested loops yet. And I don't know if I have to.
You're doing a good job. I would have never figured it out.
Well, we haven't got there yet. You're watching me live debug my own. I'm getting myself stuck, so you're watching me live debug my own thought process, really. So yeah, I'm really thinking this out loud of how I want to solve this, because I started to create my own type, which isn't what I'm going against what I said I want my return value to be. I'm kind of restructuring it, right? I'm starting to do this instead. Oops. Why is this not lining up? I'm starting to do this where I'm counting. I'm trying to create keys as the job titles. This isn't really what I want to do. I really want this thing right here. So I need to be building up this object where each item in the array, so I kind of have to iterate. I kind of have to iterate, but then look up the job titles as I go along, which is, it's going to be interesting. Maybe I should go the long way with it, because if I go the short way, I'm going to use tactics that aren't. There are things that you usually learn the long way first, like the long drawn out way first, and then you come back later and you're like, I found a better way to do the same thing. So I feel like maybe I should just go the long way with this. But yeah, we are going to loop over this array, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to maybe even loop twice, because if you think about it, I'm going to loop, and I can't assume that I'm going to be on developer for like the next however many, right? Like developer is like down here, designers at the bottom, and then it's not in a specific order. So I'm going to be appending each one of these to an array, which have index positions. So let me map out this type again. So we want it to be title with a job title, and then a total employees to be some number that we calculate. And this is the hard part, is I'm currently iterating. I can't count those employees yet, as of yet. I have to actually loop over the entire set first, just so I can make sure I grabbed all of the pieces of data first from like all of the developer. I had to go from beginning to end of the array to grab all the developers so I can count the developers. Or I have to count them on the fly as we go along, which is kind of what this code was going towards. But these are the kind of challenges that will make you, when you're an intro, scratch your head, like, how am I going to count, but also iterate, but also return a newly created data set off of this? So we can try something and fail at it, and that's perfectly fine. So if I want to be creating these objects on the fly is my thought, and I can't for this. I have to build this up just like we did the character set. So that's what led me to here. So maybe I can reset this. Maybe I can store this outside of here, right? Like it's initially nothing. And then maybe I can make this loop maybe I can use 2 separate loops for this. Man, they made this one intentionally, good. So, all right, we're gonna loop over our array first. We're gonna build up an object. I'm trying to decide how I want to tackle this. We're gonna build up an object. I think that we're gonna have to loop over again. I'm gonna intentionally build up an object that we have to loop over again, because I really need the count of each employee for each job type. I can't do this. So, all right. How to go about this? I can't just reset it, then I lose all. I'm gonna build the original object I was gonna build. I feel like I was going that way for a reason. So, scene can be, I kind of want to set, I'm going to do what I originally had planned, because I'm going to set a key equal to a count is my goal. So as we iterate through each one of these, I'm either incrementing or setting the new count. And I think we're just going to iterate over this object like after this loop. So when this loop finishes, we'll enter another loop, and it's going to do the aggregation portion, because we kind of need to create a whole new structure for this thing, because we kind of have to collect this data into a format and then go over that format. Is what it's feeling like. And mentally this makes sense in my head, but it might not be obvious what I'm about to do. So I iterate over each of the employees in the array. I need to say if I have seen this job title in scene, so back what I was doing before, increment it, otherwise don't. And again, the only thing I'm going for right now is this first one, so I'm trying not to do any averages yet. And we're basically building up this object called scene, which still needs a better name. And then let's look at what that is, because I feel like I've written a few lines of code and we haven't looked at what anything even is at this point. So our scene data is basically going to be this thing right here. So I'm calling it, we can run it. So total employees 1, and that's probably the way, yeah, because I did something wrong here. If my employee's job title has been seen inside of scene, then I want to increment by 1. I also need to put the job title in there. I actually need to bound the job title to the number instead of just adding a key with. Instead of getting this, I kind of want to put like developer is the count of 1 instead. So I actually don't want to do this really. I don't want to set the key equal to that key. I actually want to create a new key, which is my job title. I want to say, so this is maybe something you haven't seen yet, but I'm passing my value for the first person, Joe, or is it Joe? Yeah, Joe, the developer. I'm passing the developer value as my key. It's like I'm dynamically populating keys at this point. But I have to do the same thing here too. So these 2 lines have to match. And maybe this output value will make more sense. Oh, now we got not a numbers, but we did get the developer keys, right? So I got developer. Actually, I got some interesting behavior here. I got developer, product manager, designer, and each one of them says not a number. And we briefly touched on this. Actually, those are not a number. Let me take these spaces out. Just make sure it's not weird behavior happening here. Okay, it's not. I'm not going crazy. Anybody see what I did wrong? I feel like it's this right here. So scene total employees. Yeah. So this also has to be that. Does it make sense that this is going to be the actual job title so for Joe, I'm basically putting this value in this spot. It's becoming that, right? So each one of these is becoming that. If that makes sense. So if I run it, no, looks like it's freezing up. And where I copied all my code. All right, so trying to run this again. Oops, that's wrong. I didn't save that. Run that. All right, that's more along the lines of what I expected. This is kind of weird. Maybe it's because of the space. It's probably because of the space. Yeah, it's definitely because of the space. We can still access these by string values, though, even though it looks kind of weird. But I basically created a structure for myself. So this is basically a mapping, right? It's like an object literal where the keys are the job titles. The values are the counts of employees for that job title, but this is not what it asked for so far. I created this type intentionally because maybe I need to, my plan is to eventually iterate over, maybe iterate over this one again, because I need to return an array. I basically need to now convert this thing. Whoops. I need to convert this thing from this format right here into our return value, which is supposed to be more like this, I believe. So each one of these is meant to be, well, not exactly like this. It should really be title designer. And the second key is total, man, I already forgot. Total employees, right? Total employees 2. I really need to get this into a structure where, a newer structure. So, you know, something like that. Sorry, I'm not gonna do all of them, but I kind of need to convert it, right? I need there to be a title with the developer and that thing. So this gets me, I guess, part of the way there. So if I'm gonna stick to this for now, I'm gonna stick to this first part of it for the moment, and we're gonna do it. We can do another iteration. So the first loop is going to happen all the way through. It's going to build up the object. And then when it's done, it's going to immediately jump into a second loop, which this is perfectly valid to do. But now I can build up my array from this, maybe. So I built up this object, and then I could build up this object separately now. But this time I need to loop over everything that this for loop built up inside of this piece of data. So this loop is going to wait until this loop is done. It's going to run it from top to bottom, and the current loop, the execution of this loop, has to go all the way through the array 7 times. When it's done, it exits the loop and then re-enters the next loop. So it's going to happen in the order that we're putting it in, which is good. But this time I want to iterate over the items in here now that I've kind of like aggregated all of the counts for the developers, and I want to push them into this new set that I'm going to create again. So this is actually a lot to do it's just a lot of steps, really. If we just did this one part, it probably would have been an easier challenge. It actually looks really close to the number character challenge, it might have been really easy to accomplish this, but it's like combining that logic with these extra steps where we need to like aggregate, which makes it more difficult. And this is how a lot of challenges are. Like, you're like, I know how to solve this one piece, but now I have to do all these other things to it. And breaking it down piece by piece like this is totally, it'll help you solve challenges rather than looking at it as a whole. And so the next, I wanted to jump back to the slides real quick because I said for n is for objects, and we have to keep in mind what data type we're working with, because I explicitly made this one an object. So I really need to pick a better name for this. I'm going to just say let item in scene, my scene object. That is a really terrible name for that. But the syntax for it is for let, and each item is actually going to be the key, the name of the key as we iterate over it. So if you remember, I'm going to be iterating over each key individually, which means I can access each value, which also means as I iterate over each key, my key is becoming the value of my new object, if that makes sense. Like my key is the value that goes to title, and my value right here is my value that goes to the new key I need to create. So I'm basically reconstructing a whole new object off of my own object that I created from this previous loop. I'm kind of like inventing my own solution here. There's probably a much better way to do this. This is the first one that came to my mind when I reread this like 6 times. So just like I created this object and had to store it outside, I shouldn't have to do the same thing here for this loop because I have access to both values. I don't have to aggregate or count anything. I literally just need to translate my current values into map them to new keys. I basically want title. I don't have to do that. That's me immediately jumping. I was writing Python today, so I basically want to create this object, right? And if item is my key, if this is my object, right? Let me put this up here. So scene is going to be like this object that I built in this loop up here, right? So these are my keys. Title or item is storing each of my keys. So let me just say key. Maybe that's better. So I'm going to set my title equal to the current key that I'm iterating over, because when we iterate over objects, it doesn't iterate over the key and the value. It just iterates over the key, but we can use the key to access the value from the object. And this is actually wrong. That's supposed to be 1 right there, but we can use the bracket syntax basically. So the thing that I'm trying to build again is this. Like, I want an array where my title is, it can't be repeats. I can't have a title with developer multiple times. It has to be 1, and then I need my total employees to be in there too. So I need total employee. What just happened? Total employees. I need that to be my value, right? I need it to be that. So I would say scene and the key of scene. Our current key of the scene object is this value. Is that confusing or not? Is everyone following that? Just this part, like, I don't think we've done this before. This is for n. It's for iterating over objects, which means that as we iterate, it's storing just the key inside of this temporary variable. Just like this one was storing each value of the array, which might be confusing because each value was an object. This one is like a string. Like it's a string value of the key that we're on. So I can use the brackets because seen as an object, I can use the bracket-like notation to access our given key. So this is really value. It gives me my number value for each one of these. So I didn't do anything here with it yet. This is me mapping out what I wanted it to look like. My object, it needs to have a title. It needs to have total employees, because I'm trying to just do this first step and get it in the format of an array with a title, a total employees, but it needs to have each one of these, everything from the array, it needs to have that. And I can do that because my array is empty still. We never even touched this aggregated data yet, but I can create these inside my loop. And aggregated data, I need to like add it. I need to like put it into my array. Does anybody remember what the method? There's like a method to add these in to an array, like to mutate an existing array. I can add more items into it, or values, I should say, values of any data type, which this one is an object. So just to add to array. So if I just look up words that I might type, add to array, and I put JS for JavaScript, I can see that they talk about push. Array has concat, but concatenation, we know that has to do with, well, let's look at it. That concatenates one array to another array. So it takes a 3-item array and a 3-item array, and it makes it one big array. That's not what we want. But if I click on this one, I can, in W3 schools, array push, if I have some initialized array, it could be have items already or none. If I do the method push, I can push Kiwi to that array. Oops. Oh, they didn't have an example. That's not. Let me go to MDN. Maybe not. Oh, there it is. Array push. All right, here's a better example. If I have an initialized array, has 3 items, and I do array name, the variable name, dot push, pushes its method, and I push another string onto that array, it will basically make my array the same array, and it will push the item on the end of that array. I kind of want to do that same thing, but I want to push objects instead of strings. I want to push an entire object in each time that I call it. That's my goal. That's the wrong challenge. That's the wrong challenge. This is the right challenge. All right. So I want to do the same thing, right? Sorry, here comes a train. I don't know. I'll try not to talk alongside it. I have no idea how loud that is for y'all's end. So AGG data is our array. I want to push to that array. So I want to change the array each time we look at each one of these pieces of data. So, whoops, I want to push. I want to push that piece of data I was trying to like mock up. Let me go back. Let me go back to that. Let me undo. So this is what I was thinking in my head. I can't really do that, but I want to do this thing. I can do it in this line. Like I can literally I can do it on separate lines if I want. So I can say let new, what is this? Let employee count. This is our employee count object, I guess is what we'll call this. And I'm going to push that. Hopefully, I was just going to do this all in the line like that, because you can do that instead of storing a variable for it. But I'm just going to do it like this because it's, step by step, I guess. I'm setting a variable. I'm saying, hey, create a new object literal. It's going to have a title key, but the value of that title key is going to hold our key for this other object. So I'm going to hold, this is going to hold like developer right there, because that was our key from the scene object. And then this is going to hold like the number that was bound to whatever key was. because we're using bracket notation on an object to get the value out of it. I want to see what this object is, because this also is a lot to think about when you're trying to print this out. So I want to print the line below it. We'll do AGG data. What is that thing? And I'll clear it and I'll run it. So now we have some, we have our scene data, right? So this is the object that was inside of scene, the scene object that I built up from the first loop. And my second loop built up this second object where why, is that a third return? It is, I think that's the third. I think that's the return. Let me comment that out. So it's going to be undefined at the end because this console is making it look weird. All right, that looks better. That looks less confusing. So my scene data object, it had key value pairs, right? It had key developer. The value for that key was 3. And I built up an array object where it's holding an array of multiple objects. But you see that I didn't duplicate developer across any of these keys because scene data aggregated that data. And then the second loop took the aggregated data and then put it into a new format that we wanted. So this lets me create individual job roles and tie the values to them, right? So developer has, from the data that was passed in, I basically aggregated all of developer into one object, product manager into its own object, and designer. And I could actually, from what I have so far, I could go add more pieces in here if I wanted to. I could add another, sure. Let's say I make that. I mean, let's say I didn't get a bonus. Because I didn't get a bonus because I struggled at the beginning of this challenge. There's 2 Chris's though, which that shouldn't matter. But oh wait, we're using developer already. Let me make this different. Like, let's make it back in developer because that's my favorite. That's my go-to. So I added one item, right? So there's only one backend developer in here, total employees, right? And if I did put developer, it would just increment whatever developer currently is if I reran it. So developer has 3. If I rerun this, my aggregated data should account for that. So now I have 4. So now I can change, now this data type, from what I have right now, I can literally pass, as long as it's structured in this way, my code will currently count employees based on their title. It'll go through each title and it will basically generate an array of this aggregated data. But this isn't the whole challenge. We haven't solved the whole thing yet. We have another part, right? We have to do averages, and I have 32 minutes to do some averages. Shouldn't be too bad. We actually got a good portion of if everyone's following so far, we actually did a good amount of the work between these 2 for loops. So this one is technically performing the aggregation that needs to happen per job title. And then the second one is putting it in a format that we want for the return value. So if we want to add averages, let's go back to this README real quick. So it wanted us to return an array of objects that represents each job title and corresponding compensation data. They actually have an example at the bottom. So they gave us this, right? And the output that they're expecting was this thing I'm trying to build up the whole time, right? Like we've done the first part of this. We've done this. Like I can do that right now. We don't have these parts yet, but we can add them in because we already have the logic that builds the first part of this. We have the logic in place that builds this first part out. We actually just need to do some averaging and just assign the keys where they need to go to make this thing happen. We kind of had the framework to build. We could even add more keys and values to this, but the whole process right now is building out. If you think about it without all of the keys as just an array of objects, and those objects hold some kind of aggregated data, we have that in place. We just need to add the rest of the parts to that. So we need to do averages. And how do we want to tackle averages? Because where am I? Let's see where it makes the most sense to put averaging. So when I loop over an array of employees, let me go up here to where my employee. Let's look at this. Let me get rid of the one I added. Let's look at their last employee for the moment. They have salary. To get averages, the formula for getting an average is like the total. It's the total divided by however many. The total sum divided by the total count or something like that, right? Like the total count of. For us, it's going to be adding up total. It's going to be total salaries combined divided by the total employees. So total salary divided by the total employees. To get the total, we can't get total employees while we're looping. Well, let's see, can we? We technically can get all of the employees. Array has a .length function, but if we're looking at an individual employee, we actually need to aggregate. When I say aggregate, I mean we need to like go over every single item in the array and add everybody's salaries together, like with addition. We just need to add them all together. And then we need to divide by however many employees there were that we added together. So to get an average, we have to like say, all right, Joe, I'm gonna take your $125,000 salary. I'm gonna add it to Kelly's, and then I'm gonna add it to, and then take that value and add it to Joan, and we're doing a sum basically. We're adding every single person's salary, and I'm saying, okay, once I have that eventual big number, I'm gonna divide that by however many people, however many salaries we grabbed. I'm gonna divide it by that. So it should be 7. So 125 going down the list, so we can get an average across the company, add everybody's salaries up, divide by the total employees. We should have an average salary across the company. That was quick math class real quick for averages. So I can't really do it here because I'm looking at an individual employee at a time, and I haven't like summed up those values yet. And again, this scene object could probably have a better name, but I could technically say, all right, well, if I'm already counting my developers, I guess I could count this thing is eventually going to become this, right? Developer 1, and then every key is going to be like product manager is in here, right? It's going to be that. My initial thought was like, hey, I could just add like total, like I can sum up my total salaries in here, but that's not a good idea because I'm iterating over all the keys down here. So sum would actually become, it would become a problem because sum would become a title, which isn't what I want. It's not the thing that I want yet. So I'm going to drag this out a little bit and we'll say salary sums, and we'll start from 0, right? I'm just going to do this as a separate piece of data itself for time. I got 25 minutes. So while we're doing this, while we're going over, like I said, while we're going over every single employee, because I know I'm iterating over every person, I need to grab this salary and sum it up for every single person. And that's just one value. So my salary sums, but I know I'm also going to need bonus, right? So I'm going a long way about this too. So I'm going to need to calculate a salary average, a bonus average, and let me just put those in place for the moment. And in here, I basically just want to say salary sums is equal to salary sums, whatever it was previously, which will start out at 0. And I want to add the current employee's salary. So as we iterate over every single employee object, I want to grab the value of their salary and just keep adding it, because this is outside of the loop. It will start at 0 and it will only go up. I can't put it inside the loop, because if I do this, every time the loop comes back around, it would reset it back to 0 again, which then will have the wrong value. So I need to persist this number outside of our loop. And just with that piece in place, I should be able to check that actually. So my code is getting a little bit messy. Salary sums, let's just see that it's like a pretty big number. It's not 0, it should be a pretty big number is what I'm hoping for. So our code still runs, we still get our aggregated data, and then salary sums says 661,500. And that seems fair, because like this is 77,000, that's 12, oh, that's a bonus. This is 77,500, that's 97,000. So if I added all these up, I should probably get 661,000. Seems about right. I need to divide that now. So this line right here is inside this for loop right here. This is what is giving us our summed value. Like we have to let this run before we can divide. So if I do oh, what just happened? Is it not responding? It's thinking about working. So salary sums, I have to wait for after the loop to finish for all of the values to be added, and then I can divide by 7. I know that there's 7 in there, but I can't hard code this to 7. I need it to be like however many employees were in this array that we looped over. So this is an array data type, right? It's an array. So it has a dot length, which will tell us how many items are in that array. So I can actually divide by that attribute. I can ask it for its length. This gives me my average for salaries. So does it make sense to put it right here? Let's see. We need to return an array of objects that represents each job title. So we kind of want average salary, this calculation, we need that to go into, it actually needs to be scoped per job, right? So we can't just grab average salary across every single job. We actually need to scope these to a job. So we have the right logic in place at the moment, but it's technically in the wrong spot. So stepping back to our scene data thing, this thing that I originally created, maybe it can be better. Like maybe I can shift this structure a little bit more into my favor, where my value isn't storing one value. Maybe it stores 2 values now. Like maybe a 2-item array, I'm thinking. I'm trying to modify this on the fly to work for me, because I know I need to map an average salary, and my code needs to like keep it together with developer. Cause that's what I want an average salary to be in here for just developers, average salary for product managers. So I kind of need to make this one work that way. I actually have to refactor my code to do this because it's gonna impact my second loop. And I'm just thinking out loud here. So the thing I did right here, I can still do it right here, but now I have to change this, the way I stored this for inside of this, the way I stored this for inside of here, I think. Let's see. So hopefully everyone follows what I'm about to do right now. I'm about to change the structure slightly just so it will work for me. And I think I already copied that. So the structure oops, did I leave these up here? I did. The structure I'm trying to create for scene now, it was this, but now I think I want to make it this, where it's an array of 2 items, where the first item, what was that value, 4? So the first item in the array will always be my total employee count, and then the second item of that array is going to be my average salary, because I can positionally index these things if I need to. You'll see, I'll show you in a second. So I'm trying to bind this average salary. I'm trying to keep it with this developer key so that I can still keep it when I create. I can still keep that same number and pass it along to this other array of objects I'm creating. This is a pretty good challenge to have y'all solve. It's probably good we're going over this because this is working. This is working with everything you know how to do, but also nesting things that, like, you're nesting an object. We're basically creating like an array with an object that has a value that is another array. So it's like nesting more complex objects. I'm creating an object so I can try to solve this problem, invent a solution for this problem. And this isn't even the only way we could solve it. There's more ways to do this. I'm just thinking about this. As I think out loud, I'm trying to invent a solution for this. And I gotta take this out. So this loop, loop iterates over all employee data. So this one, I need to kind of tie that array that I want, this structure that I'm trying to go for. I need to make it happen in here because this code is like setting my key and my value pairs. So I actually have to set this another way. And this is setting my object equal to, this is going to look complicated, I think. So when I say this, I want it to give me back my array. It's going to be a lot of brackets to do this. Basically, if I was to do this, would it make sense to y'all if I did? I'm accessing the first index item. This is going to look crazy. I'm trying to change the structure, right? So that 4 is going to be index 0 in this. The value I'm trying to set is an array. Actually, I don't even have to set it at this point. It already exists, or it will already exist. Let me back up. Let me do it in else first, because else creates the structure initially, and then the if side of it is just adding to it. So if I say create my initial array object, but I want you to start it with a 1, and the average salary is going to start from 0 for the moment. Like I've just, actually, no, it's not going to be 0. I've just now seen this employee. So I want to mark them as the first employee that I've seen, because that's index 0 is going to represent, I am saying that the first item of the array is my count, and my second item of my array is my average salary. But I don't have to start from 0. I can say start from employee. I can grab the salary out of the employee object. So we can start with that employee's salary for that title. So, man, this is rough. You guys let me know if this is rough. We can, rough to follow, I mean. So up here, I don't want to do the same thing, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to reset it back to that again. I want to increment the values that are in those spots. So I'm going to do index 0. I'm going to do them separately. I'm going to say whatever is in index 0, I want to set it back to that again, +1. But index 1, I need to update the salary with, if I've already seen this developer role before, I want to increment the current salary that it started with the next salary, is what I'm trying to do here. So the first index item is the second item in the array. And I want to increment it. So on this line, I'm incrementing salary. And this code is getting, this code is getting somewhere where I don't like how it's starting to look, because it's just, this is a lot of brackets for y'all to look at. It makes sense to me. I just don't know how it's being received right now. So it's, and this is me incrementing my employee count separately, right? I'm doing this in like separate cases, and the thing I'm trying to build up right now is this. So I'm trying to increment my count for index 0, and then increment my salary separately for index 1. And that's kind of what's happening here. If you're able to see between all these brackets, if you're able to see that that's kind of what I'm trying to go for. I changed a lot of stuff. Let me run it and make sure that we're seeing we're actually seeing like an array in place of this 4. Like it's going to be an array with a 4. Actually, I think I took somebody out, so it should be 3. But then it will have like a salary number that it's aggregating. It's adding up all the salary numbers. So scene data, it says 3. And it says $382,000 for the sum. We haven't averaged anything yet. We just literally like went through and added salaries together. So if I want to confirm this, I would just go through here and look at developers only, and I could pull out a calculator, right, and say like, all right, take 125,000 for that developer, add it to 135,000. I should have 260,000 right there. 260,000 plus that should be 382,000. So I've summed up all the numbers. It's not an average yet, because we have to divide this number by however many developers there were, not employees. So if we only summed up all the developers, then we have to divide by however many developers we summed up to get the averages for developers. It's the same formula, but we have to keep in mind who we counted so that we can make sure our numbers stay in alignment. So if we know that it's 3 developers, we actually know our number. We need to divide this number by that number. So whatever it ends up being, like, we need to do this, but we can't do it until this loop is done, if that makes sense. Oh, by the way, we're actually, I don't know if I mentioned this. I started working on salary now. So I started working into salary, if it's not obvious yet. I'm gonna get rid of some of these comments because it's just making me hate my code. It's like, it feels like it's messy. It's so messy. I don't want to delete all of them though, because, all right. I think I have references, like I used these, but then I went away from them. So I wrote those, but I ended up just storing it right in my object, right? I stored it right here. I summed up my values. I didn't average them yet, but I have the sums. But my eventual data down here needs to, it's just returning what this had at the moment. Actually, it's returning it the wrong way. You see how like I changed my loop up here, and because of the way that this loop relies on the structure of the data, I still get the right title for that, but my value is being stored as, it's just retrieving the array out now. Like it's not individually retrieving the 3 out for the employees. So I have to fix that. So this thing that I get back now is no longer just a 3. It's actually like a 3 with an average salary right here, like some number. It's basically like this. Whoops. So that's what scene key is. It's looking at this array. So I can actually index the array. I know that there's always going to be 2 items, and the first item is always going to be my total employees. So I can index this array 0, because the 0 index every time is my employee count for that. But I have one more part. I need the average. So we'll call this job salary average. I'm going to put this in a separate variable just so I'm not doing more calculations with brackets here. So this number I know is the first index of my array, right? It's 3. I need the second index item. So I need to actually take 1, which is my salary, and I needed to divide it. I need to take this number and divide it by that number so I can get a salary. So I'm storing that. Like this is going to be like developer's salary is what I'm trying to represent. Now that I'm storing this calculation, I can actually just put it right in as its own key. And I'm going to split this across multiple lines so it looks a little bit better. So let me do that. Right, so I'm just splitting my object across multiple lines so it's easier to read. It's more friendly on the eyes here. So what did this key have to be called? I think it was AVG salary, because the goal is to get, we already did these 2 and we're working on trying to finally get this one right here. And I think they did the calculation for us. So 127,333 is what we should get when I do this, when I add this in and we inspect this this result. So it was AVG salary is the key. I did the calculation on this line, so this holds that value. Now I can just add it in like that. And this is gonna impact my return value here. So now instead of 2 keys, this 3 should, because of the way I access the index item specifically from here, it's not going to be this whole result of an array. It's going to actually grab the first item, and then tie it to employees. And then this one is taking index 1, which is my salary, and dividing it by index 0, which is my count. This is a lot to explain. I hope hope I'm not just melting brains here. We can totally go over this again if we need to. This is a lot. This is so much to do and explain it at the same time. So
Can you keep all those comments in the code? And
yeah,
when you
yeah, I'm going to try not to delete all of them, but I do want to make sure that I kind of was talking as I wrote them and explained it, but I didn't really explain them in the comment. They're just kind of there. So maybe I'll add a few lines to explain what I was trying to talk about, just so when you read it later, you don't have to, or I guess you could always rewatch the video too. So our return aggregated data now, this is what scene data was when it started, right? I built this object intentionally to calculate, to perform my calculations, like to iterate over all of the data and build a new data set for the sole purpose that I could iterate again over that data set and build my ultimate thing that I wanted. So I have my array with an object. Each object has its unique job title, which is that's what it wanted. The total employee count, we can go through and count them and make sure this is right. I'm pretty sure this is right. There was 3. The average salary is saying, it's actually a bigger decimal, but it is 127,333. Did they just, I mean, they said float, so, but their result didn't show a float, it showed an integer. Let me go back here again. So I guess they just trimmed off. Yeah, they don't have any decimals in here. So I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know if they're, I guess we won't really know until we look at each one of them, because they either like trimmed it off or they did rounding. They rounded to the nearest whole number. So if it was below 5, they rounded down. If it was above, it was 5 or above, they rounded up. That could be what they did. I don't know yet. But I do know that it's a whole number, right? It's not a decimal. So at the moment, I know that I can just do what, like, what is it, parse int, or I could have just done integer division, which is, sorry, I'm trying to find this line. So integer division, I could just do, I could do, yeah, I can't do that, can I? Could have swore I did this in an example. Anyways, we could use parse int, I guess, or convert a float to, wait, is this for strings? I can't remember if this is for strings or anything really. Let's find out. Nope, it works for it. So we get our whole number now. So now I've gotten the first 3 steps of this problem. But we can actually apply this same logic. Like I can take this same line because it's just an average. But this is just for salary and count, but I need to do the same. I need to basically modify this incrementing salary line. If I want to do it for bonus, I can do this same exact line, right? And now I can use 2. I can make this array 1 more item longer, right? I can add a comma, and the next item, the 3rd item in this array, could be all of the summed up bonuses for developers. And then you can do, then yet again, we can do an average across that. So first we have to use this loop to sum them up. And then we can use this loop to perform the average once we have that collected data, basically, if that makes sense. So I could change this, I could keep the structure the same because I picked an array. All I have to do is just add that extra item to it. So basically it would just be like, here, let me take that last line out so it doesn't break anything. I'll just initialize it with something so you can see. Oh, whoops. Actually, we don't have to do another line. We can just add a comma. This is our initial array starting point. So I just need a 3rd value right here. I need the bonus, the starting bonus, and then this one is gonna talk to that. It's gonna update it with, it's gonna increment it up. But what is it called? I can't remember. Just bonus? Yep. So we just like we retrieve salary, we can actually put bonus right here. And if I were to just run this, it's not going to increment. It's just going to put the first person's initial salary in there. But let me run it. Yeah. So this is the first loop, and it's talking to the scene object, right? It's building up scene. So if we look at scene now, it has a 3 item array, and it only has the initial person's like bonus in there. So that person got 15,000. It's not incrementing yet because I didn't put the line. This side of the if statement is doing the incrementing. But just like salary, I can also copy that line. So I could do this line and say bonus. And now I just have to fix all the references when I do this. So scene, when I grab any object, so if I grab a developer by its title right here, so developer, it gives me back an array. Index 1 is the salary. I need this to be index 2 now. So I'm trying to reassign this value, and I also need this to match. And it can't be the salary, it has to be the bonus. So I'm saying update every time we go over another developer each time. Also update, not only update the salary, but also update this third item in my array. And then we can see what that looks like. Now it says 39,000, right? So this function's getting really big because we do 2 loops and we're building our own data sets. So now we have to make it, the second loop is building the AGG data. So the first loop built scene data, and then the second loop uses the scene data to build the AGG data, basically, this aggregated data. Now I just need, all I need to do though, is because I'm pushing this entire object that I'm making into my array, all I really have to do now is do like bonus average, that's probably wrong. AVG bonus is what they want the key name to be. So AVG bonus. Now I need the calculation for the average on the bonus, basically, right? That value needs to go here, which we can refer back to the logic we've already written once. And this is why I was going to say we could create a function to do to handle this calculation and the parsing of the int and everything, but it's not too many lines of code here. So the first item in the array was salary, and we wanted to divide it by I said first. The second item in the array, which is index 1, is the salary. The first item in the array, which is index 0, is the count. I need to do this same calculation, but I need to use the third item in the array, which is bonus. So I need to divide bonus by the count as well. But this needs to be bonus. We'll call it bonus average. And now I can just replace that spot, and we can look at what that gets us. And then there's one more average that we have to do, which is basically taking these two right here and adding them together so that we can have what they called a total compensation, which is your bonus and your salary combined. But we're doing the average salary, the average bonus combined together to give you the average compensation for a given role, right? Given the developer role. So we're basically aggregating all of these employee data so we can build this average compensation. I feel like I want to leave that one and see if you guys can figure that out. I'll put this code in Slack, and then you can like use this as the working point and then add on to it, or maybe you're following this whole time and you can just update your own code. But yeah, I'll leave that one for like the last bit. We still need average because we are going over time now. So, oh man, what did they call it? AVG total comp. So I'll just drop here. I'll just drop these here like a comment. And but that also means that we need to do what? Actually, I don't think we have to modify. We have the job salary average and the bonus average right here. Like any given role, calculation for job salary and bonus average is right here. You could actually just, I think, add these together right here. So it's actually not the same it's actually not going to require you to add all these in. Maybe I should have left that last one out and let you put this bonus one. I should have left the bonus one out. Because it seems like all you would have to do is add these together to get your developer total compensation average. Yeah. Yeah, I'll share this in Slack. I know this was a lot. This had to have been a lot to take in. These were a lot of steps for this challenge. But you did get to see me struggle at first because this isn't ideally how I would want to write all of my code, but this might be how I initially go through my code to solve it. And like the long way, it might look long and ugly. I could probably like put reduce all of the, you see how I'm reusing like this so many times. I could store this in a variable and just refer to that variable instead, because I'm using it so many times here, and it makes my code, makes these lines go longer. There's a lot more brackets to deal with. So if I wanted to clean this up a little bit, I could grab this just as a quick example. And I could just call it title. And now, oh, sorry, let me do it up here. Now, everywhere I see this point, I can just grab, this is not working with me at all. I can just replace title, right? I grabbed the value out of there. I stored it like it's going to restore it each time it iterates through the loop. Now I can just make my code look at least a little bit nicer and easier to follow this way. If that makes sense, it really like reduces this line and all these black brackets and what's happening. So that might help. But it also, like, now you have to go, what's title again? Where did that come from, basically? So we could do that. Or you could just leave it this way, but it does make it, there's a lot of brackets to like, it's like bracket inception in there. So if y'all want to do that, you can. I'm going to put it back how I wrote it for the video. But yeah, this was a lot. I'll add some more comments before I put it in Slack, just so I can talk about the purpose of each of the loops and what the plan of attack was there, and that way you have a reference. Yeah, that's pretty much the end of this. We're 7 minutes over, but